Okay, so welcome back to this next session with my friend Tony Porter. Hi, Tony. You still with us? You doing okay?
Yeah. Hey, Graham, how you doing, man? I'm all good.
It's good. I really enjoyed that first session, and it brought back the TED Talk. It brought back our meeting, but also learned a lot more about your rationale behind the TED Talk, and it actually gave me more. I think as men sometimes need confidence from other men about talking about these issues. I call it reassurance, and I think it's just when you're saying things, it's good reassurance for me that I'm saying the right things, and there's still much more learning to do. I think one of the excuse me, the great American basketball coaches, John Wooden, said, "It's what you learn after you think you know it all that counts." And I think we all need to open our mind to new learning, and that's what I think my pro read does. It spreads out encourages everybody to keep that learning cup full. To keep it there and keep topping it up with new bits as well. So I really enjoyed that first conversation. And what I want to do in this conversation, the second part, is to get us thinking about what are we doing, what's needed from society. And in that first conversation, we talked about the man box. We talked about this collective socialization of boys. In many ways, the man box it's the oxygen that boys and men are breathing. So how do we change the oxygen? How do we change the situation that many boys and men find themselves in?
We have to meet men where they're at. That's our belief. Part of this collective socialization of manhood also, and we talked about this earlier, men have to be in control, which means, and the opposite is being vulnerable, right? And so we're not allowed to be vulnerable as men. And actually is in vulnerability where we take risk, right? You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable to take a risk, meaning like you're leaving yourself open. That's men will say. They don't say vulnerable. They'll say you left yourself open. It means the same thing, right? Vulnerability is the space where we usually take risk. So when we're engaging men, A, we have to meet them where they're at. B, we have to be vulnerable as the engager if we want them to be vulnerable. We have to demonstrate that. One of the ways we demonstrate vulnerability is through transparency, right? So I have to be transparent. I have to talk about myself if I want you to give up yourself. I have to be open and talk about my own challenges, even as I sit here as the person delivering the information. Is not an exact science. I don't have this thing down pat. I've just been looking at it and paying attention to it. So I've been on what? I've been on my own journey. I'm welcoming you to start yours.
Yeah.
Right. And that transparency and that vulnerability is really full of, enriched with stories and conversations, right? For us, it's less of an academic experience and much more of a transformational experience. My friend, and I know you know Joe Ehrman, when he's doing work around coaches, he talks about a transactional coach versus a transformational coach. We believe the same thing because men in of ourselves, based on this socialization, this man box, we're taught to be transactional, not transformational. So another way to look at that is it's not an academic experience also. So we want men to think and learn, but what we really want to do, Graham, we really want to get to their hearts.
Yeah.
There's also a mighty long distance between a man's head and his heart. It's not that easy, but that's where we believe the work is, in his heart, not in his head. In his head, we want information, but the last thing, the lifelong change, transformation, happens in his, we believe, happens in his heart. And so you want to get a man on his journey and you want to join that journey with him, right? Of sharing and experiencing and talking and all of that comes with that. And then this is what you said that I totally agree with. well, I don't know if you meant it this way, but this is what I heard, and this is how I see it. I believe action comes as a result of discomfort, right? When I'm no longer comfortable being who I am or I was, that's when I go to action. What gets me to that place of discomfort is this journey that I got on with you, right? I got on this journey with you. We're having these conversations. Then I'm going out and I'm doing the same thing. And it still feels okay to me. I stay on this journey with you. I go out, I feel a little bit of pain, but not enough. Man box still working 100 for me, right? But then that starts to change, right? And then it gets to a place where my behavior is more uncomfortable than comfortable. And that's when action happens. I think it's, in many respects, it's a personal thing, but I truly believe that action, be it changing my life, be it talking to others, whatever I choose to do that's action oriented, that's positive, it comes as a result of discomfort. And you don't get men to discomfort, in my estimation, not long lasting discomfort in a transactional relationship, an academic relation. It has to be transformational. And that means there's a process, right? There's a time needed to be spent together. Yeah, we need men, right? We need men. We put a lot of attention into working with, grooming, re-educating, re-socializing men who have influence over other men and boys. And usually those are the alpha male type men that we collectively look up to. So we spend a lot of time with athletics. And not that all men and boys are involved in athletics, but it is one institution that collectively as men, we have a lot of respect for. So we really work hard with athletes and coaches. Coaches spend tremendous amount of time with our boys. Athletes have a tremendous amount of influence over men and other boys. We don't even call coaches by their actual name. We just call them coach, because that goes so far, we don't even need to know their name, just coach, tremendous influence. Pastors, imams, rabbis, these men, priests that have influence over other men, we pour into those men, really helping to engage them, that if we can get them to embrace this message, that they are the men that men listen to, right? If you have one of your star football players come to one of your schools, the boys are sitting on the edge of their seats. They think they're going to hear all about football, and what we tell those men is, when you get in front of those boys, X's and O's of the game is the least important. What you need to be talking to them about is about developing and building men of character. So we're constantly working with men around their influence, and then taking that influence and creating what we're doing here, engaging men in healthy manhood, making that their platform. That's one of the things that we find very, very important. Working with men who have a tremendous amount of influence in corporate America, right? For us in corporate America, in the States, in our corporate world, that are making huge decisions in the lives of people, right? Again, challenging them, teaching them. Their job is going to be tremendous as it relates to equality and most importantly, equity. So for us, a lot of it has to do with the re-socialization of men, of manhood, and engaging men who have really the power to really help expedite that process. We spend a tremendous amount of time with these men.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm working with some corporates just now around tackling sexual harassment in the workplace, and I know that in these organisations, the vast majority of the leadership, the chief executives, are male, and I'm trying to hook them gently into the conversation, getting them to think about how these issues, these big issues, are impacting on their workspaces.
Mm-hmm.
They're costing, on the top end, they're costing organizations millions of pounds, millions of dollars, but they're also impacting on the people that are doing the job.
Mm-hmm.
As well. So I think
Right.
You're right. Is we do need to get men to be more involved in these situations. What about the role of fathers?
That's
Coaches.
that's what I was thinking next, is fathers, right? And how we are teaching our sons what it means to be a man, right? That's another extremely important group. We're teaching them what it means to be a man, and then we're also modeling, right? So we're really engaging fathers that you teach your sons to be their authentic selves, embrace them in their authentic selves. Teach your sons that sharing their feelings and emotions is healthy. Teach your sons that asking for help is what they need to do, right? Teach your son to promote equity and equality. Demonstrate that in your relationship with your wife, with your partner, with their mother. Demonstrate equality and equity. It's so important for men to have an emotional relationship with their sons. We kind of move ourselves out of emotional relationships with our sons, and we leave that up to them and their mothers, which means that as they grow into men, and if there's something going on with them that they need emotional support, rarely do they go to their dads. They're more likely to go to their mother or to another woman in their lives, because as men, we removed ourselves from that relationship with them when they're boys, right? And that's something you go and talk to your mother about. I'll teach you how to throw a ball. You go talk to your mother if something's hurting you inside. That's what we've done. And what we have to do is be emotionally available for our sons, letting them see that we're an emotional being who's emotionally invested in them. Yeah. And so that's very, very important as fathers, that we really, really embrace the authenticity of our sons, and as our daughters as well, right? That we're promoting equality and equity between the genders. So we're not at home creating one set of gender roles for our daughters and another set of gender roles for our sons. That we're real conscious of that we're constantly promoting not only the authenticity and being who you are, but also we're challenging traditional gender roles as we're raising our boys. And so the role of fathers is very, very, very important.
Yeah, I think I often use the phrase, what you promote, you permit. And I think that phrase, applies to the chief executive in the big organization. So if you are learning about sexual harassment, if you're learning about the impact of bullying or domestic abuse on the workplace, talk about it. Don't keep it to yourself. Talk about it, because by talking about these issues, you become the ally. You start to set the mood music for your organization, and that's you being the leader that Tony and I want you to be in your organization. I think fathers are crucial. Fathers are guideposts for their sons on how to behave as a man. But they're also guideposts for daughters. I've got daughters. I've got two adult daughters, and I'm a guidepost for how they could be treated by men in the future. How I behave with my wife could determine how they expect to be treated as a partner, wife in the future. So I think we need to, yeah, you're right. As a father, as a coach, I sometimes think coaches, I worked in America with the Coaching Boys to Men program, and I know the power of the coach. And I love how in some teams you create learning environments around things like domestic abuse, sexual violence, bullying, because these are issues that off the field that could become distractions on the field and impact on performance. And Joe Ehrmann talks about that as well. And that I worked with the Chicago Cubs a few years ago, and Joe Madden was the manager at the time, and he embraced the work we were doing, because he wanted his players to be the best dads, the best role models, the best community members they could ever be. And he believes if you get that bit right, the rest will follow. The game will follow.
And he's smart enough to know that if I can get you to live the appropriate life off the field, I'm going to have a better chance to keep you on the field, right? Even if that's his agenda, which I'm not saying it is wise enough to know that. But coaches have tremendous influence. When they speak, we listen, men and boys alike, right? So just imagine having this critical mass of coaches that have, embraced what we're talking about here. And there's something else that's important. All men won't really hear this, but there is that collective of men that will also understand collective liberation, right? Yeah. When we're talking about maybe men who understand how oppression works, how racism works, how classism works, right? And they understand how oppression works and the impact oppression has on people. These men may also understand when we say, I'm not free until she's free, right? There's no freedom for me until there's freedom for you, right? There's a collective liberation at stake, right? That and it's so much, there's beauty in that, right? There's a requirement for authenticity, right? There's a requirement for equity. There's a requirement for equality, because the liberation, of freedom, being liberated and free, is a collective experience. And so that's another place. Like I spent a lot of time working with men who their mission in life is to undo racism, but they have never really embraced, anti-Semitism, or they've never really embraced anti-sexism. They just been kind of like focused solely on racism, and helping them to understand you can't fight off white supremacy, right? White racist supremacy while doing white male supremacy. You got to be in it for, you got to understand what we call the intersections of oppression, right? You got to be in it to end them all, to really, even if my heart and my focus is on anti-racism, I have to have a real working knowledge and appreciation for anti-sexism, right? You can't do one and not do the other.
Yeah. So I think it is about doing. I think the call to men for me is about doing the knowledge, learning about these issues, and learning about the role that men have in the perpetration of these issues. It's very clear. But it's about how we talked in the last session about moving from this place of discomfort, being uncomfortable, to the action and doing something. And for me, it took people close to me to be victims of men's violence, sexual violence, for me to realize, be uncomfortable, because some men might use that discomfort to fight back, find the perpetrator and do the man thing. But for me, it was, no. There's an opportunity here, and it was Jackson Katz, and I mentioned this in the last talk I did with Jackson. He was the first man that said to me, "You're a man in Scotland. What are you doing about preventing violence?" And it was the first time anybody had ever put me on the spot and asked me that. And my answer back then would be completely different to what it is just now, through meeting people like Jackson, people like Tony Porter as well, yourself, Tony. So I think I'm a real believer in creating spaces for conversation. I don't think we spend enough time creating meaningful conversations with our boys and men on all of the issues that you've talked about. And for me, that's key. Because
that's seriously key. Is a starting point. Is, first of all, understanding the importance of spaces. All right, we got to get that together, and then creating the spaces. And in doing such, we can make use of many of the existing spaces, because we as men and boys, we already love to congregate together for whatever that common cause is. Many times it is sports, right, or other activities, but we're used to gathering in male only spaces. Is just how do we make use of those spaces? So we spend a lot of time with coaches engaging them. You have your practice 5 times a week. Use some of that time to have conversations around what it means to be a healthy man. We speak at American football, baseball, soccer, as we would call your football camps, 100 boys and 25 coaches. We're there having these conversations, which would traditionally just be a camp, but we're there having these conversations. We have curriculums, coaching healthy, respectful manhood. That's our curriculum for middle school and high school youth. We have it in school systems where they're making use of it there. So you have to create space. We are doing men's circles. Those things, they're happening all over the country. Now we're doing them virtual. Creating space for men to, at the end of the day, Graham, creating space for men to have conversations around what it means to be a healthy man. And just doing that, see, we firmly believe at A Call to Men that if you increase healthy manhood, you decrease violence against women and girls. You could do that and never even talk about violence against women and girls. As long as you're increasing healthy manhood, one of the results of that is going to be a decrease in violence against women and girls. So just creating spaces, and that's a win-win, right? Creating spaces is key. But at first we have to have folks in positions of influence to get it. We have to reach them, and for them, because they're the gatekeepers of that space. They're the ones that have access. And once we can get them to value what we're talking about, and then we're in. And it's not just spaces for boys, right, and girls. It's spaces for adults also, because there's a top-down, bottom-up relationship, right? It's not just about educating boys. It's also about re-educating men, right? So a lot of folks love to just work with the young people, right?
I think
you got to work with both.
Yeah, you've got to work with. Yeah, you've got to work with the young boys who are not in that mindset, or the men who are in the prisons. You've got to work with everybody. Right. And I think that for me, and also I find that when you create these spaces for conversation, the healthy norms often rise to the surface. And I saw that in the prison. When I created that safe space, that notion we have more in common than divides us comes to the surface. We have the commonality of respectful manhood.
Right.
Or being a good dad, or being a good coach, that comes to the surface. And if you don't create
one of my trips to the UK, I don't remember what prison it was, but I visited a prison and spent time with men. And we were talking about anger, right? Being that secondary emotion. And again, men not being taught about their feelings and emotions. So we just think when I'm angry, I'm simply angry, not really knowing that when I'm angry, I'm actually scared or I'm afraid. And having conversations with men, it was about 30 men in the room. And we're talking about not being in touch, with our feelings and emotions. And I asked them, don't tell anyone in the room. I'm not asking you to do that, but I do want you to think back to the incident that got you here. And if you were angry, did you know that you were actually scared? Or did you know that you were actually in pain? Yeah. And you can see the look in their eyes as they were grappling with that. Like, what was really going on with me? And so what the conversation, I asked them to do that. I don't ask men to put those answers into space. But where we were going with the conversation was around, as men, if we understand how we feel emotionally and what's going on with us emotionally, we have the ability to pause instead of being impulsive. Yeah. Because for many of them, not understanding who they are emotionally just lends to being impulsive. But if you understand who you are, and it might not be a pause where you can actually count to 10, but there's a pause. It might be a split second pause, but it's enough of a pause that it redirects your action, right? It's just enough of a pause that it redirects your action. And when you don't understand who you are as an emotional being, you're just on impulse. You're just reactive, right? And you literally have no control to some degree. I mean, that's not going to stand up in a court of law, but in some degree, you're not driving yourself, you know? But if you understand yourself, and when we had that that was a follow-up conversation from asking them to think back. But they get it, you know. I mean, but some of them are there for the next 15 years. But if they had heard that when they were a boy, or if they had heard that when they were a young man, if they had had the opportunity to practice that, it could have changed the course of their lives.
It's about getting them to stay in the moment as well, isn't it? To stay, you know, rather than act impulsively. I do that in my bystander work. You know, I want people not to panic and run into a situation or run away. I just say stop and think, even if it's for that split second. You know, and you're right, our prisons are full of scared men. And the violence and the behavior we're seeing, that's masking the trauma. We touched on that in the last session. That's masking the trauma where that person is programmed, you know, to respond. You know, I heard the saying many years ago, if you're born into a war zone, you will quickly become a warrior. And that's what you're alluding to there, Tony, is that idea that if you don't try and stay in the moment, then you will be impulsive, and violence could be and that's why violence is the go-to tool for far too many men, because it's in their biography, isn't it? It's in their biography from when they were 3, 4, or 5, and violence is the go-to tool. So listen, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, Tony. I think we've really covered a lot. It's great to check back in with you. You've not aged a bit since I saw you. You've been looking well. You're looking really well. No, we've covered a lot. We've talked about that TED Talk. We brought into this idea of the man box. I want people watching this not to dismiss the man box or think, you know, we've solved that. No, we've not. We've not solved it. And I think at this time of COVID, we really need to be aware of the man box. We have young boys and young men thinking they're invincible, thinking that they can go out and party and do what they want to do, but they're at risk. And a lot of that is coming from the way that we're socialized. We're seeing it in this country as the tap's been turned on after lockdown, people going out and about, and we're seeing young men and young girls, but young men behaving in ways that, they shouldn't be behaving, because they're putting us all at risk as well.
Older men saying I'm okay is nothing wrong when they're not okay, they're ill.
Yeah.
You know, we have older men go to the doctor because your wife or partner made you go. Yeah. And even when you get there, you still don't want to tell the doctor the truth. This whole inability to ask for help. So we don't practice preventative medicine either as older men. And they say, you know, single men have it a lot harder. You know, if you're married and your partner, you know, you're more better off because you got somebody there forcing you to take vitamins, forcing you to eat right, forcing you to practice preventative medicine, you know, versus single man, you know, he's eating McDonald's burgers 4 times a week, you know, versus salad, you know. So it's, you have, like you said, the belief in being resilient and powerful with young men, and then older men not even want to accept that I am weak, I am getting weak, I do need help, I do need this, and still operating as if they're not. So all the way around, you're 100% right. This man box is in play, and COVID-19, this pandemic, is exposing us.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think we need to keep talking about it. And if you feel that you're getting pushed back and people are stop blaming men, is the phrase that I get. You know, stop blaming men for their behaviour. We're not blaming men. We're just talking about where behaviours are coming from. So I think for people watching this, check out Tony's TED Talk. It's still relevant as it was back in 2010. Still very relevant today. check out the work of A Call to Men in the US. I believe there's A Call to Men UK, which is still there. I've not really spoken to Kay for a few months now. But check out the work that the organisation does. Follow Tony on Twitter and check out their website. And thanks again, Tony, for giving up your time this afternoon to spend some time with me. And I've really enjoyed the conversation. And again, thank you to My POV Online for hosting this conversation.
Thank you, Graham. Good to be with you again, man. Look forward to the next time.